Good evening. I will call to order Wilsonville City Council meeting November 4, 2019 at 7:15 p.m. and request a roll call, please.
Councillor Linville.
Present.
Councillor West.
Here.
Council President Ackerval.
Here.
Councillor Lehan.
Here.
Mayor Knapp.
Here. Thank you. Would the audience please rise and join us in a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And please, the council, I would be open to a motion on order of agenda.
Your Honor, I move to approve the order of agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. We approve order of agenda as currently presented. Copies are available on the counter at the side of the room if anyone would like to have one. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, passes 5-0. Bringing us to our first item, which is scheduled for communications, which we are pleased to welcome Representative Christine Drazen, House Minority Leader, House Minority Leader now, to give us a report on what is going on in her world. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Knapp and members of the council. It is my pleasure to be here tonight. I am excited to give you an overview of the 2019 session and talk a little bit about what I anticipate for the 2020 session. But first, let me begin a little bit to give everybody here who might not be as familiar with a sense of my particular House district. I represent Charbonneau, but in addition to representing Charbonneau, I also represent Canby, Malino, Beaver Creek, the rural portions of Oregon City, Boring, Damascus, portions of Happy Valley, as well as all the rural parts of Clackamas County over to Estacada. So I appreciate the honor to be here tonight and to stay connected with my friends and constituents right here in Wilsonville. This community is an important anchor in the metro area and a high-performing economic engine. So thank you guys for your service to this community as members of this council. And again, it's a privilege to be here tonight. I was elected to be House Minority Leader by my colleagues in September. It is a new role for me, really new. And it really is also, in addition to being an honor to be in that position, it's an opportunity for my community and this region for me to be able to continue to elevate the interests and priorities of this area in my new leadership role. And I look forward to doing that. So let me just begin a little bit with the 2019 session. The 2019 session, as you can imagine from my perspective as a minority leader and last round as a freshman minority leader, I viewed it as a very contentious session, is probably the most sort of charitable way that I could talk about that session. It was, as my first sort of exposure to that as an elected official, I would say that it was the casual exertion of absolute power, in some cases to the benefit and in other cases to the detriment of Oregonians. And I recognize that in your last month, it looks like you received a briefing from your legislative team on the session. So you've been over, it looks like cap and trade, the corporate activities tax, PERS reform, and transportation issues, as well as housing bills and other items. So I'm gonna spend a little bit of time on some of these themes, but I'm not gonna retread ground that you guys have already been over. But I would like to talk about a few of my priorities and a few of the issues that I was interested in pursuing in this last session on behalf of the community. So I have to say, one of the things I was most excited about was $300,000 for the Second Home program, which is through Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon. This program is focused on homeless youth, unaccompanied youth in our community. And right now, if a person is an unaccompanied youth in high school, they only have 50% chance of graduating. And if they participate in this program, those numbers, dramatically increase up to 95%. So their success rate, the impact that this program in particular has on lives is pretty dramatic. And so I was very supportive of that amount of funding, and it will go into Clackamas County schools. And so I'm very excited to see that money be used throughout this biennium in support of that program. Another item, of course, was funding for our local extension service to fund, something to fund our berry research program, which of course improves our products that end up going out to market and supports our local farmers. So that was a great one too. We also supported legislation around suicide prevention and making sure that our schools across the state all have suicide prevention plans in place. Most schools do, but you would really be surprised at the extent to which offering schools some expectations around that, best practices, opportunity to collaborate with each other is helpful to making sure that we absolutely have that issue addressed at a school level across our state. We also had funding for Clackamas Women's Services, $485,000 in new funding that will help expand Clackamas Women's Services, again, specific to outreach programs in our local schools and students that are impacted through those issues. We have 60-day notice for drug price increases. I was a member of the Healthcare Committee in this last session, and the issues that came before that committee were broad. Very consequential potential changes to healthcare in Oregon were considered in this last session. But one of the ones that I'm most excited about really is the 60-day notice for drug price increases. I think that will go a long way in increasing transparency. What I really think will happen is that rather than jacking the price of a drug at the last minute, there will be pressure applied on those companies, and that those price increases will in fact not be as high or as fast as they would otherwise institute without that 60-day notice. There's also now the ability to have emergency access to insulin. For those who are diabetics, they can now get their insulin emergency access only through their pharmacists, and I think that is a substantial improvement, and I think it's very important. I'm kind of surprised we didn't have it before, but I'm thrilled that we have it now. It's funny, I talk so often about cap and trade and the corporate activities tax and all those kinds of items. It's nice to talk about stuff closer to home. There's another item that I was really excited about, and that was funding for our FFA programs across the state. We appropriated $1.43 million in general fund for FFA, and I carried this bill on the floor. And what I love about this funding is that it now allows students who enter into this coursework to be able to be automatically enrolled in FFA, which we all know is a really strong leadership program for our students. And it also will support the teachers who are the advisors for these programs to be able to be paid throughout the summer and before they were volunteering their time when they continued to work with their students throughout the summer. And this provides ongoing support for those teachers, and I think that's very important. Let's see, what else can I talk about that you guys would be interested in? You guys, I supported paid postage for ballots. We have, a really long time ago, I was staff in the legislature in my 20s, and we had just instituted vote by mail at that time. And the conversation there in the beginning was reduce barriers, increase participation, and the thing that was missing this whole time was paid ballots. And so I was thrilled this session that we were able to get that funded. And I think that that actually, again, is going to increase opportunity for people to participate in our civic life. And I think that's really good and positive. Let's see, what else do you guys want to talk about? The list is so long. We had about 700 bills that that moved across the House floor this session. And of those 700 bills, I think I voted against like 67 or 68 of them, which means my approach as a freshman minority party member this session was to read through the legislation and do my absolute best to find something that I could support. I really wanted to work in a bipartisan fashion throughout this session, and I really prioritized the value of working across the aisle and being as collaborative as I could throughout the session. And so for the legislation that I voted against, it was always issues that it did not serve my community well. And the way I operated this session, if somebody communicates with me by leaving a voicemail message or an email or popping by the office, we have the ability now through technology for my staff or I to be able to load into our bill files, our electronic bill files, all communications from constituents. And so if I'm on the floor, I can bring up the bill that we're considering at that moment, and I can see anyone that has contacted me in support or in opposition to legislation. And if they provided additional information as to why, I can see that too. And that kind of input from our community made a huge difference for me as I weighed legislation. And it gave me an opportunity leading into the floor session to be able to reach back out to people and say, this bill's coming up for a vote. The bill has changed since you last communicated with me on it. It now looks like this. Do you want to provide additional information? And it allowed my office and me personally to be able to do my absolute best to make sure that I got as much input as I could on legislation as we move through that process for the first time for me in Salem. So I think at that point, maybe I'll jump to the 2020 session. And trust me, I have quick notes on all kinds of stuff, and I think I could talk for maybe the entire night on cap and trade, but I'm going to skip it entirely because I'm thrilled to hear that you guys had a nice overview of that legislation. So in the upcoming session, I would understand that there will be legislation to fix some of the challenges that have already been discovered in the corporate activities tax. I don't know exactly what the fixed bill is going to look like. The Republican side, our office will be working with some of our members to propose our own version of a fixed bill to the corporate activities tax. I know the Department of Revenue has gone around the state and they have invited businesses to share input as they're developing rules around that. I read the transcript from those hearings, and it's a robust conversation. There are a lot of unanswered questions at this time. So they have a lot of work to do before those draft rules can be put into place. And in the meantime, I think that we should be responsive to what we have heard from the community and provide additional adjustments to that legislation. We will also, I'm going to work to support additional funding for community corrections. In this last session, as I understand it from our sheriff here in Clackamas County, we're about $50 million shy statewide from what they need to really continue to support current service levels for community corrections across our state. And that funding will have substantial adverse impacts if that is not restored in the upcoming short session here in Clackamas County. So I'll be working hard to support that funding. We will also see some proposals around transparency in government. As you guys probably heard, our public records official, Ginger McCall, left the state recently, and there were some issues around access to public records and how that process went, that it sounds like we could make some recommended changes to improve transparency for how our government operates. And I think that there's bipartisan support to do that. And I'll be supporting that legislation as well. There'll be about $800 million, I think, on the high end over the course of the short session that will be under discussion for additional expenditures. I'm sure that those will be some robust conversations about how much of that to set aside and how much of that can actually be spent at this time. And that is, I think that that's the biggest. I think that those are the biggest issues. Oh, I know that there will be additional conversations around some of the proposed ballot measures. I'm sure you guys have been following along with some of the stuff that's gone through the Secretary of State's office. I would expect those issues to come before the legislature prior to moving forward with those initiatives. And there's also discussions around some of the incentives for folks to come into our local communities, enterprise zones, and whether or not those kinds of local abatements should in fact require those entities that take advantage of them to then be required to use prevailing wage. So those conversations are ongoing throughout this interim as well. I would hope that if that issue moves forward, that it would be with a robust conversation with our communities that use enterprise zones and use tax abatements to encourage local economic development, and that if those conversations continue, that the people who are impacted have the opportunity to affirm and weigh in and and that they're a part of the consensus process. So I think that's it for now. Do you guys have any questions? I had heard that there might be questions.
Well, we might. Council, anything you would like to ask Representative Drayson at this point?
I put my thing on. No?
You did. Councilor Lehan.
Yes, I wanted to tell you that I appreciate your standing up for the interests of the city of Wilsonville, or at least are wanting to be part of the conversation with regards to the Aurora Airport, and being able to have a fuller conversation about that. But the other two other things that I don't know if they are coming up in 2020 or not, but one is the whole river runs through it thing. Has to do with wakeboarding restrictions and also the potential opening of the locks, or what might go forward with the locks. I don't know if that's coming before you at all.
Thank you for reminding me. So I'm on the Willamette Falls Locks Commission.
Okay.
And we are working toward a process by which there is an entity that owns the locks. So that, I'm sure if you've been following it, that's been the
Right.
sticking point on the state side, is that someone needs to be in charge. And as I understand it, the state doesn't want to be that someone.
Yeah.
And so having the conversation about what a public entity might look like there has really been the work of the commission. And if they're able to get that resolved, I would expect that there would be funding in support of moving that project forward in the short session. So thank you for that reminder.
And then the other funding thing is relative to the Boone Bridge, the improvements to the Boone Bridge. We were working on at least getting some preliminary engineering funding for that project, since every year it seems to be deteriorating.
And the study was funded. And at this point, I would expect that that is most likely an issue that comes before the full session in 21, rather than the short in 20.
Session. Yeah.
Would be my best
That's
guess on that one.
understandable.
Other questions, comments? Councilor West?
I mean, it's been a pleasure to get to know you over this last session, and I think you've done a bang-up job. My question is, I know the cap and trade, things fell apart at the Capitol. The wheels came off the bus, in a sense, in the Senate, and things kind of digressed. What changes will be palatable, you think, for the entire state that will still deal with environmental issues while not being so contentious and being more collaborative? Or do you see there really being a goal of being more collaborative through that process and more bipartisan?
So I would love, love, love to have a more collaborative bipartisan process around that issue. Cap and trade this last session, as you know, had over 100 amendments. Not a single Republican amendment was adopted. And I would hope moving forward that there would be an interest in working together, since there is statewide impact if that legislation is passed. When that bill was before us this session, I met with the chair of the committee, and I said, I'm concerned that my district, House District 39, fewer than 2% of people in my part of the community ride a bus anywhere. And there's no other transit besides busing, and that it would disproportionately impact them for costs. And so they have further to go for school and doctor and grocery stores and all of those kinds of things in the rural portions of Clackamas County. And 22 cents a gallon to start for increased gas costs going up as high as $6 at full implementation is too much. And so my conversation was, is there some way we can slow the roll on transportation? Is there another approach we can take? Right now, the market does not offer viable alternatives to people who want to reduce their carbon footprint and would like to also avoid that increased gas tax. There just aren't products out there that fit everybody's needs yet. And in addition to that, if all of the people that we would like to go into an electric vehicle actually did that, there's not even adequate electricity available. I mean, even if they had charging stations everywhere, there's not enough energy in the grid to support that expansion at this time, which means that people would just have to bear the costs right now. And so I said, is there some way we can do this? And she said, absolutely not. We can add additional charging stations in your community and hope that that's adequate. And I felt really strongly that it would not be adequate at this time. And the inflexibility had a lot to do with how they felt like they needed to structure that legislation. They wanted to join the Western Climate Initiative, and to do so, in fact, had certain limitations on them. They had to include transportation if they were going to do that. They could not exclude it. They had to include natural gas, which also would affect any Oregonian that, heats their home with natural gas or turns on their stove and has a gas stove. And the increased costs for that were not just limited to large manufacturers or something, it's everyone. And so the regressive nature of the tax, the inability to be able to manage it, all of the ways that it would adversely impact my community in a way that we couldn't actually balance out with other folks in the state meant that I couldn't actually support that legislation at this time. But I do think, to your point of bipartisanship and working together, I am hopeful that there will be an opportunity in the coming months to be able to continue to explore ways to work together on an alternative to that. I think cap and trade in its 2019 form isn't likely something that suddenly will gain bipartisan support. But I don't think that that has dampened the commitment on both sides of the aisle to address climate. So I think that if there's a shared commitment to addressing climate and we can be more flexible on what that looks like, that we have a path forward in the short session or in the long session. If what we see is quite simply just the same version of 2020 with a few small tweaks to carve out a few special interest groups that are holding back votes, then that's not actually bipartisanship to me. That's just navigating the political process. And so but right now I really do feel hopeful and optimistic that there's some conversations happening, that I get the sense that people want to reach out across the aisle and they would like to have this conversation in a way that's a little bit more collaborative and productive than how it was approached in the prior session. But time will tell.
Anybody else? Councilor Linville?
I think I'm on here. There. I just wanted to echo Councilor Lahan's appreciation for your support with the Aurora Airport. That issue is still an issue that the city of Wilsonville is involved in and likely will be for a while. And I am waiting for the governor's appointment for me on the Locks Commission. So I look
nice.
forward to working with you on that commission. So
I look forward to that.
thank
That's
you.
good news. Thank you.
Well, I certainly appreciate your work and your openness to meet with everybody, regardless of their affiliations, I guess. And I think that that's very healthy. I have kind of a wonky approach sometimes to things. I happen to be reading the MIT May-June edition of their technology review, which you probably don't just pick up every day. It's on climate change, and it's the scientific perspective on numerous elements, and it is very sobering. And the piece that seems to me to be not part of the dialogue very much yet is what's the cost of doing nothing? And, Miami is already raising streets that are inundated by water, and the city is having to do that. And New York City's got a plan in which the low estimate is 8 inches of water rise. The mid-range is 15 inches. The high range is 30 inches in Manhattan. What do you suppose the cost of that is? I mean, it just feels increasingly like we have to frame our dialogue around the realities of what's happening now and what's going to be happening. You look at California this year and last year both. They're just horrible. So it's a worthy discussion to have, and it's a timely discussion to have. And the younger folks that I talk to are increasingly concerned about what their future is going to look like. And I think we have to not, those of us like me, who are not your generation, but, you know, it isn't going to be like it was in the 60s or 70s or 80s or 90s. It's going to be different. And we have to be willing to face realities and know that there's going to be a cost to do something to help mitigate, to help adapt, to help respond, to enable people to have a quality of life that's equivalent to what we've enjoyed in past years as we go forward into future years. And that's a huge challenge. And it's increasingly becoming clear that it's larger and more multifaceted than we may have realized. So that's the piece that I hope we can use, you know, when we meet and have dialogue about what is it appropriate to do and how do we go about doing it. That's just my...
Knapp, you're drawing me into climate conversation. But I want to say one quick thing, because I share your concerns moving forward on this issue. And I think that the conversation that is different at the state level compared to the MIT studies that you're reading and the global perspective that you have, to your point, what you're talking about is national and global impacts. And so the thing that we always, at these different levels of government, we always have to balance and really navigate, okay, so what portion of this is our balanced work to do to contribute to the whole in a way that responds to the need and the size of the problem, but also the people that will be impacted, recognizing that both are true.
Yep.
And so the approach at a national level is one thing, the approach at a regional and then state and then county and then city levels all proportionately have their own role to play. And I think a lot of the conversation we have in Salem is not, is this an issue or is this a problem, but what portion of this is attributed to our responsibility, and also in relation to, also in relation to what have we done so far. And we have clean fuels, and we have all of our coal-based electricity going offline next year. Our last plant in Boardman will go offline at the end of next year. And the things that Oregon is doing now, I think, affirms that we have a shared commitment to being a part of that solution. And so moving forward, I think that it always needs to be a proportional response, that recognizing that the full responsibility for every bit of this doesn't lie with just one of us or one level of government, but really with all of us. And that if everyone takes a proactive approach, it will be more balanced and more proportionally spread in a way that everybody can manage.
Well, I'm heartened to hear your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. It's great to see everyone.
Thank you so much, too. Okay, that then brings us to our citizens input and community announcement section, which is an opportunity to address, for visitors to address council on things that are not on the agenda. Also a time to address things that are on the agenda but not scheduled for public hearing. Council will make every effort to respond as much as and early as we can, either tonight or thereafter. We do ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes, and I have just one speaker card so far tonight. If there's anyone else that would like to speak, please complete a card and pass it forward to the city recorder. Ms. Arbon. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jamie Arbin. I've been a Wilsonville resident for 25 years. My address and contact information is on my speaker card. I've been coming to the meetings fairly regularly since April. I haven't been able to attend in the past month when Ms. Linville was appointed. I've been coming to the council and speaking regularly, passionately about how cannabis has saved my life. I'm wearing a hat this evening, and I appreciate your graciousness in allowing me to wear it because I haven't quite grown enough hair yet from cancer treatment to get a cut. I used cannabis oil to save my life, and I went to cannabis college for this. I've demonstrated with realty, studies how cannabis positively impacts property values and how much money our community is leaving on the table by not participating in the taxation and regulation on Measure 91. I'd like to just say welcome to the City Council. I would hope that you will continue to do also with me and other citizens, as was stated during your appointment time, that the reason you were selected is because you listen. I really tuned in when President Akkerval noted that that was one of the biggest reasons why the council decided to select you amongst all the candidates. This is something really important to me and my community. In a perfect line in my community, the person across the street from me, myself, my father, the married couple, the husband and wife behind me, and the people directly across the street from them, we've all fought cancer. Almost half of us have passed away from it. Some of us are still here, and I have to drive really far out into my community to go get my medication during chemotherapy. I'm shocked that my council will not review the current laws that we have in place because I believe them to be not in line with Measure 91, and I'm very disheartened that my community continues to say no to a renewable resource for both hemp, fiber, can be turned into energy, gas, all of these things that can actually positively affect climate change. I only have a few minutes, but I did want to alter what I had planned to talk about tonight to include the climate change piece because I think cannabis has a really huge piece in that part. Oregon is leading the charge in our country, and we shouldn't ignore this. I really hope that my council takes some time to re-review this, and if anybody would like to talk to me about science and facts involving cannabis and how it saved my life, I would really love it. I'm the director of operations for a cannabis company, and I hope to bring this awesome, positively impactful industry to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak at this point? I don't have any other cards, and seeing none, I guess I will move forward then. To mayor's business. Don't know what happened to our nice relaxed summer, but it seems like it's gone.
Lasted through October.
We had the pleasure of having our students from our sister city, Kitakata, here this last week, and I think Councilor Akkerval hosted kids, and I had the pleasure of doing a welcome breakfast for them here at City Hall. It's gratifying, this relationship that's gone on over 30 years between Wilsonville and Kitakata, and it's very nice, the level of commitment that we see on both sides of that. I had the pleasure of having time to sit down with TriMet General Manager Doug Kelsey. Turned out to be a 2.5 hour conversation, which was not enough to cover all the issues that pertain. I did broach the questions about SMART's authorization to serve all of our community as it grows and the UGB expands, which remains a issue of contention. Attended the Willamette Intake Facilities Commission Board meeting and looked at what that group is doing. They are guiding the work on the Wilsonville water treatment plant intake setup and the plans to do the seismic hardening of that facility is moving forward. So that discussion was good. Met with the Metro T2020 funding measure task force, which is the group that's studying proposals for transportation issues to put in front of the voters a year from now, looking at various proposed corridor level transportation improvements, including the Southwest Corridor Light Rail proposal that would come out to Bridgeport and is a fundamental component of that measure. There's also a whole range of different street corridors that are being proposed for improvements, mostly oriented toward increasing safety and racial equity to access of different types of transportation needs throughout the region. So Clackamas County has several projects in that mix that are proposed. No decisions have yet been made. The committee was going to be asked to vote on their willingness to back those in November. It sounds like that may be pushed off now till December, which would allow the November meeting to be spent in more dialogue before that gets to kind of a decision point. The task force decision is a recommendation to Metro Council, who then has the ultimate say-so. Wilsonville was pleased to host the Oregon Tech Energy and Environment Summit that happened this last week at OIT here in town. And I had the pleasure of giving some opening remarks and welcome to those folks there. I was not able to attend the entire thing, but the piece that I was able to attend certainly raised some significant questions about how prepared we are for emergencies. Do we have our own microgrid? Do we have a distributed energy network that would allow us to operate? I mean, they got all kinds of discussion we can have. And I was also pleased to be able to attend the Charbonneau Arts Festival here this last weekend and see some of the great art that is being done by our students at the high school level, as well as by people of many ages and our seniors in Charbonneau also. And it was a great event, lots of fun there. So all of that going on since last meeting. Upcoming, the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee is considering recommendations for the regional flexible funds projects. There's recommendations, look like they're coming forward, that the county will be backing on the Monroe Street Greenway in Milwaukee, on the Trolley Trail Bridge for a replacement that would connect Gladstone and Oregon City, for Clackamas County industrial areas and intelligent transportation systems for freight movement in the Clackamas industrial area, Milwaukee and Wilsonville. Potential road projects that might come out of the County Strategic Investment Fund is another whole area of discussion, not flexible funds, but the vehicle tax that's being collected. There's 10% of that will be directed toward this strategic fund that is meant to kind of improve county roads where they interface with urban and those roads that flow through city jurisdictions, and what should be done, and can they be upgraded, and can they be transferred from the county to the city, where the cities would have jurisdiction, but the cities don't really want to have to take a road that needs drastic improvement and assume authority for it. And so the idea is that some of these funds might be used to upgrade and strategically plan how to make that kind of a switch. We have Veterans Day commemoration upcoming on November 11th at the Korean Memorial here in Town Center, and I've agreed to do a greeting there. Clackamas County Business Alliance is receiving a presentation on international trading and how Oregon is interfaced with that. The Metropolitan Mayors are meeting coming up in November for, we'll kind of get back to regular meetings after the summer hiatuses. Greater Portland Inc. has got several meetings going on, including an upcoming sort of a dialogue about where commercial real estate development is in the current market and economic environment across the greater region. And also, we'll be having the Washington County Coordinating Committee meeting upcoming on their recommendations for regional flexible funds. So an awful lot going on around the region that's not right here in Wilsonville, but certainly affects us as those decisions go forward. I would invite the councilors to give me their reports and perspectives as you would like. Councilor President Ackervall.
Thank you. Just wanted to briefly echo your comments about the Kitakata delegation, and also thank the many volunteers in our community, the businesses that welcome these students for tours and, different activities throughout the week, people that served as hosts, the schools that, graciously brought them into classrooms and helped share what's happening with students here in our community. City staff, I know at SMART and Parks and Rec, and there was so many different groups involved with the delegation in making their visit educational and fun as well. So thank you to all of those individuals. And I think probably most importantly, though, I just wanted to mention, drop off your ballots tomorrow, right? Because that's kind of a big one. And tomorrow, and since we're all waking up like 5 a.m. anyhow, because we had the time difference, we can just bring them over in the morning because tomorrow's our last day. So, we had comments about the paid
Where do they
postage.
bring 'em?
Exactly. Don't put them in the mailbox anymore because we need to put them in the big white box in front of City Hall. Used to be at the library, but it is right in front of City Hall. So you can drive it up at any time, day or night, and drop them off. Till 8 p.m. Yeah, till 8 p.m. tomorrow. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilor Lehan.
Yes, has been a busy week, and I would agree that the Arts Festival, I attended that, and I had to ask people there, do they have a arts test that you have to pass to move into Charbonneau? Because I can't believe how much talented art people they have at Charbonneau. Every year, it seems like the quality of the material and the entries it's just amazing. Last week I did a presentation here for second grade, for about 94 second graders here in this room, and on Wilsonville history and civics and generally geography, etc. As much geography, civics, and history as you can cram into 10 minutes. And
For second graders.
and I had to scramble to get the night before because I remembered I needed to get Councilor Linville's picture on my presentation, so that I had a current city council to present. So, but I did. I also want to thank the residents of Charbonneau who came on Halloween morning to do the live feed to testify about the Aurora Airport update, master plan update, which was a meeting taking place in Sun River, and needless to say, quite a number of us didn't really want to drive all the way to Sun River to give 2 minutes of testimony. But we had more than 20 people show up, at least 10 of them testified, and it was just brilliant testimony, all exactly 2 minutes long, and all very different subject areas. So I was very pleased that at the level of engagement of our citizens at that event. And then lastly, on Friday, I hosted the State Heritage Tree Committee here at the Stein-Bouger Barn to consider the walnut grove in Marasi as the next state heritage tree for the state of Oregon. It will be called a grove. It was accepted. It will be the only one for 2020, the only statewide new thing for 2020 in the Heritage Tree Program. We will probably be dedicating it in April for Arbor Day, probably April 10, which is a Friday, and I will get more information out about it, but it is the story of walnuts in Oregon. They are to represent, they represent the walnuts in all of Oregon, from the Umpqua Valley up through the Willamette Valley. Walnuts in the 20s was the boom and bust kind of thing. It was supposed to be a bigger boon than wheat for Oregon. It was the way to secure your financial future was if you just planted walnuts. And, but of course the whole walnut thing collapsed pretty much by the 40s, and by the 60s they were gone, and there's maybe one orchard left now that in all of Oregon that is still in commercial production. So it was a huge story, huge financial ruin for a lot of farmers, orchard people, but it's a story that needs to be told, and so Wilsonville, like the cable trees, Wilsonville will be where the story is told, partly because we have that nut dryer down there, and a very accessible and relatively healthy remnant orchard. Hard to find a better looking remnant orchard than the one we have there. So anyway, that was a big deal to get accepted by the state committee.
Well, thank you for your work on that.
So we'll have a big party in April. I haven't mentioned it to the parks people, but there you go. If there's any parks people here.
All right, is that it?
That's all I got.
That's it, okay. Councilor West.
I would encourage the Wilsonville citizens to support the school bond measures. I think they're super valuable, and that type of funding is what helps set our school district apart from others. And I would encourage you to vote yes with me on those two. There's 2 school bond measures to vote yes on, so that's how I'm voting. And I'd encourage you to consider doing that also. And I would also, please get your ballots in, or it doesn't matter. So you got to get those ballots in, and voting is important. We encourage you to do that. I also want to echo the mayor, happy Veterans Day on the 11th. I'm always in awe of the sacrifice that men and women make, and the courage that they have, and against all odds, in the face of fear, and how they continue to represent our country so well in our communities, and the sacrifice that families and wives and children have to make. And some pay the ultimate sacrifice and don't come home, and some come home and they're severely injured mentally and physically. And so I just encourage you to remember a veteran, and to remember why we have that day and we set it aside as a country. And even in Wilsonville, we have the memorial that the mayor will be speaking at, and remembering the veterans of the Korean War and what that was about and why it was significant. So it's a sobering day, but it's also a great time to remember what makes us special as a country. Wilsonville football took up a lot of my time the last 2 weeks, but that season is now coming to an end for us. Unfortunately, the 8th grade boys made it to the playoffs, but they were eliminated by West Lynn, unfortunately. And the high school team looks like that they're going to go on to the state playoffs, that they've qualified. So I'd encourage you to look to support those events. It's a great community event. Hundreds of people show up, families, kids, and it's a lot of fun. So if you have a free night and it hasn't been too wet, there are covered areas. The seats are covered for the home team, not for the visitors, unfortunately. But I encourage you to go. It's a ton of fun, and you really get to engage with a lot of the other families and kids there in our school district. And so that's something that having a son that plays football, we've done a lot of. And so I encourage you to support our kids doing that. And I got a chance to make an appearance and take a fun photo with Councilor Ackerval at the potluck in the barn. And that was a lot of fun. I could only stay for a second because I didn't make it to the football game, but that was really cool to see, and a great turnout and fun energy, and really, really fantastic. And we have a wine tasting event coming up on the 9th for a great cause for the library. So if you have the 9th off, I don't know when it starts, 7 o'clock. It's an affordable way to have fun, give back to the community. A lot of great causes come out of our library, a great way to support the local community. So we would love to meet you if we haven't met you, if you are looking for something fun to do. Are children, is it a children friendly? Nope, it's adults event, so sorry. All the other times the library is great for kids, but this is a fun Razor of Wine tasting event. So I guess that makes sense, it's a wine tasting event, right? Like, I'm sorry. But I encourage you to go to that. Come join us. We'll have a lot of fun with you. And I guess Thanksgiving's coming around the corner too, but we'll have another council meeting before then. But here come the holidays, and I bet you rain's around the corner, so. And I hope everybody had a great time trick-or-treating, because it was a lot of fun. The kids were cute. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Councilor Linville.
Thank you. I wanted to just give a shout out to Republic Services for a very successful bulk waste day. I have not heard yet how many tons they actually collected. Here it comes. Do you have it? Oh, you have it. Great, great.
You can ignore my notes of
I'm trying to
scribbling.
find out where it is. Oh, okay. So it looks like there were 336 vehicles that participated in 41 tons of bulky waste collected. I made 2 trips. And I was just delighted at how easy that process was to get in and get out, and the kinds of things that were coming out of vehicles were incredible. I mean, there were refrigerators and dishwashers, and so, I mean, my things looked quite small in comparison, but what a great day. And so hats off to Republic Services for doing that, and there will be another one in the spring, in May, I believe, and so get your things ready for that. I also attended the Oregon Tech Energy Environment Future Summit this past week on the 1st of November at Oregon Tech. I was able to be there for the entire day, and there were a number of our city staff people there in addition to a fairly full complement of folks from across the state, I believe. A lot of students and from Oregon Tech that were in their engineering program. And one of the things that really stood out to me that I think is something that is really a little bit on the cusp that we are very concerned about solar energy and production of electricity by solar means. But the one thing that was really highlighted in that conference was the need for storage. Even for our own, and I had a conversation with our director of our SMART program, and we were talking about what happens if we lose power and we're trying to run our electric buses. Well, obviously, we can't charge them if we don't have any power. So the question becomes, how economical is the storage? And it is for all of us as well, if we're looking at solar as an opportunity. I was impressed that the city of Wilsonville partnered with the Chamber of Commerce and was very visible at the conference as well. And I was not able to participate in the Halloween event that happened with the testimony for the Board of Aviation because I took a tour of the Willamette Valley Locks. It was a part of, and I thank Mark for really helping to set that up. I believe that while I would like to think that the tour was for me, I believe it was for the 3 representatives that actually attended. So Representative Barbara Smith Werner, Representative Ron Noble, and Representative Mark Meek all participated. It was a very eye-opening tour, and I have some great pictures if you're interested. And I look forward to hopefully getting a confirmation from the governor's office to participate on the commission. What a great facility down there, and unfortunately sitting not being used at this point. the appropriation that the legislature is going to be asked to make us somewhere to assist with the cost of about $14 million that it will cost to completely renovate and get the locks in the condition that they will be able to be used. So that's a little bit of a climb to make. I will be participating in the Metro Communication, or the Metro Community Enhancement Committee on the 12th of November, so I look forward to that. And I was not able to participate in the gala for the Charbonneau Arts Festival, but worked as a docent in the event on Saturday. So it was kind of fun to assist people with looking at the art and wayfinding. So it was a great time. So, and once again, I just want to say that our buses are free, so ride the bus.
All right, well, thank you so much. Lots going on in our small community, though we are a big city according to the rules now, I guess. That will bring us to our consent agenda. If we could ask for reading of the consent agenda item, please.
Resolution number 2772, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville consenting to the transfer of control of the cable franchise from Frontier Communications Corporation to Northwest Fiber LLC with conditions.
Thank you. We had discussion about this in work session. It is on for consent tonight. Is there a motion?
Your Honor, I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Thank you. Is there a second? Moved and second that we approve the consent agenda item as read. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Brings us to new business. If we could ask for that to be read.
Resolution number 2771, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville supporting the 2019 Technical Assistant Grant application to the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development for the Wilsonville Housing Variety Implementation Project.
Thank you. Mr. Polly, what can you tell us about this?
Certainly. Good evening. Dan Polly, Planning Manager. So following up, we talked about House Bill 2001 in our work session. Let me turn the mouse on here. And this is in regards to that, but it's really bigger than that. And I wanted to talk a little bit more on how this kind of fits into the bigger picture of what we're doing with housing. So as the council knows, we have House Bill 2001, and which is the one-time. And with that, the legislature has put some buckets of potential funding. The bucket that you heard about in work session is specific to these House bills. There's also every session they put money towards what are called technical assistance grants that are administered by DLCD. And as we talked with DLCD staff and internally, really the concept we're going with is we need to get this work done in a time frame that really makes sense for what we're doing with housing, to follow up on the equitable housing strategic plan, but also lay the foundation for the work we'll be doing it from 2021 into 2023, master planning for Frog Pond East and South. So at this point, we're applying for the different programs to see what funds we can to support the city's efforts on this. So really what it does then is we need to audit our code and look at the policies and then build on the equitable housing strategic plan. And really how we're doing this is we divided it into really five barriers and then actions in the project to do it. We looked at public opinions and perceptions, which when we talk about the timing of the state rulemaking, that's one that I think if we wait for rulemaking and the state to do their thing, we miss a critical window and be able to do quality public outreach. And because this is something that the community cares about, and to have a conversation about really what does, if we are going to have these duplexes potentially and middle housing mixed in different neighborhoods, how does that look in terms of bulk and spacing and parking and all these other attributes? And also the policies, but also looking at infrastructure. Infrastructure, as was talked about by Mr. Young earlier this evening, is that making sure we have adequate, and also how that funding of that infrastructure works for maybe different housing types than we've seen traditionally. And so we need to think carefully about that. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions to be answered, some of which need to wait for rulemaking, others we can go ahead and move forward with now. And we're looking at pursuing what funding may be available and being strategic about pursuing different funding, and also strategic about how this fits into the broader city program addressing housing. So really what the request that this resolution asks council support of is just over $181,000 from the state, and that's matched by city funds of a combination of staff time as well as cash for consultant services, all of which is anticipated to be within the current budget this year and next fiscal year. And what this looks like then from now is we anticipate hearing about the grant with this month. And then if that's not fully funded, which very well is a possibility, and then we'll take these materials and go ahead and pursue additional grant funding that we anticipate coming available with the House Bill 2001-2003 specific funding. And then go ahead and get this kicked off in early 2020 and complete the project by 2021 as we're kicking off the Frog Pond East and South work. So with that, questions, I'm happy to answer.
Council, any questions for staff on this topic? Councilor Linville.
Dan, is the match required, or are we just submitting that as a support for the request?
Generally match, it's not required, but strongly suggested, generally on this sort of grant. And obviously staff is going to be working on it regardless, which is the primary part of that match.
And the only other thing I wanted to say was, in case we have some citizens that are listening, that you referenced the LCD several times, but that is the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development.
Yes.
Just so folks know.
Other questions, comments? All right. Sounds like a big project with a lot of different parts that you folks on staff are going to have to juggle and figure out which pieces move forward on what timeline in order to make it all match. It's going to be a major amount of work for the city to adopt changes, figure out where changes are to be made and make those changes, all as a result of this state legislative effort to promote more missing middle housing types across the state, which is, addressed at the crisis in housing and housing costs that we're all sort of experiencing, right?
Right.
Okay. If there's no other questions, I will ask the council, what is your pleasure with regard to Resolution 2771?
Your Honor, I move to approve resolution number 2771.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and second, we approve Resolution 2771. Discussion? If there's no discussion, I will ask for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes 5-0. Thank you very much. That is our only new business item on the docket here tonight, Mr. Cosgrove, unless you have something else.
I have some things,
Okay,
but I'll be quick.
okay.
I usually say I'll just pass to illegal, but since I was out the last two meetings, and thank you for indulgence, one of those was a miss because if you haven't had your shingles vaccine, I highly recommend you get it because that is no fun. And then I was at a concert, or not a concert, I was at a conference. I did go to a concert when I was there, though, with my son, no less. So thank you for allowing me to go to the conference. Just a public service announcement, because I know that Delora would do this if she were here. 'Tis the season when Tree City USA becomes Leaf City USA. We ask all of our businesses and residents not to rake their leaves into the streets because it creates some problems with the storm drains, so please be mindful of that. I wanted to let you know that we're looking at a solution for Day Road, and the mayor's probably aware of this, and maybe if you've driven Day Road, you know how bad that road is.
Yeah.
The problem is, there's a long-term fix for Day Road, which is a 5-lane section, concrete streets meant to convey heavy truck traffic. We don't have the funding, it's not in the 5-year CIP, but we can't ignore what's going on because it really is it's a safety hazard. So I've asked staff to look at, and they are, Delora's working with Mr. Namsu to figure out some interim solutions. We have to be careful because if we do too much, it triggers ADA requirements, which drives the cost way up. So we're looking at what's the middle road here, and we're thinking for between 75 to 80,000, we could get a 2-year fix. We may have to do that 2-year fix 2 or 3 times before we get to the ultimate. But doing nothing is not an option because it really is a hazardous stretch of roadway. And so I'm concerned that it could be, potentially pedestrian or, car safety issue that we have to do something. Our street sweeping contract, I found out today that we may have some issues with that. Legal's involved. They've been told by DEQ that they can't dump their stuff that they take up off our streets anymore without some kind of a permitting issue, and I think that's lapsed. So we're looking into that. I don't know what that could mean is that we could be without street sweeping services, the worst case scenario, on November 15th. If that happens and that becomes a crisis, I would want to communicate at a high level with you all, but hopefully we can figure out and they can get something resolved. We do have an RFP out on the street for that service right now, so if it is something that becomes a problem, hopefully it's a short-term issue and not becoming a long-term one. The Citizens Academy deadline is passed, and I think we received about 30 applications, so we'll have another robust cohort group going through there. We did make some amendments to that program, shortened it up a little bit. And we're finalizing the interpretive panels. I think Councilor Lehan has been involved in that for the Beauty and the Bridge. I think the last step is to get the permit requirements from ODOT, and I've been told we should get that within the next 10 days. So once we get the permit from ODOT, then we can install them. That'll be staff doing that, Public Works folks. I want to let you know that our SMART division received the Oregon Transit Authority Service Innovation Award, the annual award for some of the stuff that they've been doing down there. And I know Dwight was very pleased, and we'll be having them present that award to council at the next meeting. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilor Eckwell, question?
Just a quick follow-up about the leaves and the street sweeping. Is the leaf drop-off, right? Do we want to talk about
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
That's on the 9th, and we bring leaves to City Hall parking lot, I believe,
Yes.
at 9 a.m., perhaps?
Sounds right.
Okay, that sounds good. 9 till 2, so you got
It's in
some,
the
you got some.
Boothsbury Messenger.
Yeah, you got some time to do it, and that might be a good alternative for
That
people
is.
dealing
We
with
highly
leaves.
encourage folks to do that.
Because they're all just coming down right now. Yep.
What does it say,
It
Councilor?
is on the first page, and it says, grab your rake fall leaf drop-off at City Hall set for November 9th, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m.
There you go.
So I guess you can get those big leaf paper bags, and I don't know how I could get that in my little electric
So if you've already raked them out in the street, get your bags and go out there and get them cleaned up.
Get them out of the
Back of your
street.
truck and cover
Yeah.
up your truck.
Yeah, because the street sweeper may be on strike here, we may not be able to get.
Did you have another question?
Yep, that was,
Okay.
that was it.
Okay, legal business, please.
Thank you, Mayor Knapp. So an update on the appeal with Subaru. We filed our response brief on October 8th. Subaru's reply brief is due November 19th to the Court of Appeals. Assuming that the reply brief is timely filed and there's no other issues, we don't anticipate any other issues, we're looking at a hearing scheduled approximately 7 to 8 months out, so it'll probably be in the summer of 2020 is when I would guess that we would be having our hearing before the Court of Appeals. In the Friends of French Prairie versus Oregon Department of Aviation Land Use Board of Appeals case, as council knows, we intervened in that case, so I'm going to give you some updates since the last council meeting. We received the record from the Oregon Department of Aviation, though they have moved to amend that record. The intervenor respondents, which includes the Aurora Airport Improvement Association and others, filed a motion to deny the city's intervention in the LUBA case, and we filed an opposition to that motion. Will be a hearing on all the pending motions that are before LUBA, but I don't believe we have a hearing date set yet. There's still more filings that are going on in that case. The other LUBA case that we have is that the council is aware of is regarding the CNL Lang property that's out off of Garden Acres Road. That is currently stayed while the parties finalize a settlement, and we anticipate that that should be happening within the next several days. So with that, I'd like to talk to the council about the Oregon Aviation Board's hearing that was held on October 31, 2019. And the agenda item for that board meeting, one of their action items was to adopt the Aurora Master Plan airport layout, findings of compatibility and findings of compliance. The Oregon Aviation Board heard testimony from several different parties and also accepted written testimony. The City of Wilsonville both provided written and oral testimony for that action item. And the Oregon Aviation Board ultimately adopted that action item. So that now raises a question about what, if anything, the council wants to elect to do moving forward. And there's a couple different options that the council has. The council could take no action, and that would essentially be the end of it, with the exception of the current LUBA case that's still going on, though that's separate from this hearing process. The council could also look at a Land Use Board of Appeals appeal and further look at the option of a circuit court action under the Administrative Procedures Act. And each of those come with different deadlines. A Land Use Board of Appeals notice of intent to appeal needs to be filed within 21 days of the land use decision. A Administrative Procedures Act petition needs to be filed within 60 days of the decision. So there's a short time frame for both. So legal's here to ask for the council's wish for either of those actions or no action. Or both as well. 4 options.
Okay, council has had some discussion on this item previously, but maybe not in the public eye so much. So the question in front of council is, what do we want staff to do at this point in time? And I think that we need to make a clear statement to the staff and clarify for the public as to what we choose to do and why. So that's kind of the question I put to the council at this point. Councilor Lehan, do you want to take off?
Well, I was just going to suggest that I think it's important that we keep all of our options open and proceed on both tracks, which is to say on the land use track and the administrative procedure track, because I think there were serious errors made in both cases, but particularly on the land use side.
Is that a motion?
Were you looking for a motion?
Well, I was asking for discussion first. Let's see if we have a little discussion first.
We have a motion before we discuss.
Usually. Then I would move, Your Honor, that we direct legal to proceed on, as was explained earlier, on a 2-front track to both challenge the land use decision and the administrative procedures.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All right, now we can discuss, according to Mr. Roberts. Councilor Linville.
I agree with Councillor Lehan. I believe that this remains both a procedural and a land use issue, that our position as the city of Wilsonville needs to continue to be strong in making sure that both the rules and the laws that govern the land use are followed. I don't believe they still have been followed, even though at this point there appears to be a decision that the master plan is approved. So I would support that position as well.
Other discussion? Councilor Akable.
I'll say that I agree that I think process is very important, because I think good process serves all facets of the community. And I think that's a theme that we've been talking about in council that's important to this council and certainly very important to this issue at hand. So I would agree with what has been said by my fellow councilors here.
Councilor West.
I would take a different take. I think that there's evidence and that the land use has been approved through their meeting minutes. And I think that we don't have a clear mandate from Wilsonville citizens necessarily to go down this road. I think there's a lot in the business community and a lot of people that live throughout the city that would think differently. And I think going through going through this process and expensive resources is not necessarily a mandate that we have. And I think that much of the land use has actually been followed, and I wouldn't necessarily agree with the council on their decision to move forward in either case.
Thank you all for your perspectives. I guess I would reiterate a perspective that I have stated to council previously, maybe not as much publicly, and that is that Wilsonville has developed a certain significant level of respect within the regional community by being an advocate for fair and consistent application of the rules, and we have successfully moved the city forward in many ways, working within the legal authority that exists. I think it is problematic to circumvent that legal process, and I do not believe that the process should only apply if someone opposes a certain outcome. And if you favor the certain outcome, then that should not release you from following the process to get there. I think that it becomes problematic if the process and rules that are in place are circumvented in one case. It raises doubts that there is substance and a requirement for following those in the future in another case, and I think that becomes very problematic. Rules are how we all get along together and function efficiently within our community, and I think that in this instant case there are strong evidence that rules have been sidestepped, I guess I would say, and that does not serve our community. If the advocates for airport expansion believe that it stands on its own merits, then I think that the process should be allowed to proceed, and they can make their case within the process, not by circumventing the process. So I think that it is both consistent with our city's past positions over a long period of time, and I think it's important that we maintain consistency going forward with those positions. And that would argue that we maintain our standing, and I would be in favor of the motion that has been made to proceed on both fronts. So, Councilor Leahy?
And I just add one thing. I do feel encouraged by the position that Aurora has taken in this, and it feels right to have us on, really, Aurora and Wilsonville be on the same side of this in terms of the principles, the land use goals, and the procedural issues that we are so closely aligned, even though they perhaps have a different outcome in mind than we do. But on the principles of the issue, we are very closely aligned, and which speaks to that point, that we're being driven by principle and not by a desired outcome.
Any other discussion the council would like to have? If not, I'll ask for the vote on the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Motion passes 4-1. Thank you very much. That's the last official item. I think that is the guidance staff needs. Is that sufficient at this point?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Knapp.
Okay. In that case, council, we're ready to be done. We will call adjournment at 8:36 p.m. Thank you all very much.